Thank you very much for staying tuned to Development Focus with Jide Ojo on ITV. Like I promised us, my next guest is already seated. She's Princess Halima Jubril. She's so many things into one. She's a gender activist, a child rights activist. She's a communicator, a PR expert, a journalist, news editor, everything you can think in the books. Halima is everything rolled. It's a pleasure to have you on this show.
I'm indeed glad to be here. Good morning, viewers.
Thanks for making it down here.
Thank you.
Our time is not friendly, but we need to make the best of it. We want to discuss impact of insecurity on women and girl child. What is your overview of this challenge of insecurity in Nigeria?
Number one, insecurity itself is an aberration in Nigeria. It's an aberration because the people ruling us now, they are military and have military background, and they've been this and that in the military hierarchy before now. So one would expect that if insecurity rears its ugly head the way it is now, with Boko Haram, with other form of banditries, they should be able to nip it in the bud in a very short time. But now you see it's lingering on, and we didn't know the beginning so much, and we may not know where it will take us to, because the entire country now is as if the entire country is under siege. So it's a real problem, because we believe that we are sleeping with two eyes closed now, but very soon we may not be able to.
Are you sure we are sleeping with two eyes closed?
In a lot of communities, they are not even. Yes, and I think in Abuja here it's dovetailing into Abuja.
Yeah.
Yes, because the the neighborhood communities are already feeling the sad impacts of insecurity.
So now let's look at how this insecurity impacts on women and girl child. What's your take on that?
The impact is enormous, because when you look at the woman, for instance, in Nigeria as we speak today, and the girl child, as if we have become an endangered species. Because when you hear stories, you ask yourself, are these really true? And then you find out that women are abducted, the girl child is abducted in school, education that is a right, even under the Nigerian constitution. You send your child to school, your mind is not at rest, because your daughter may be kidnapped. So many have been taken away and yet unrecovered. And then you look at the woman itself who gave birth to the girl child. They will be abducted, they will be gang raped under influence of hard drugs. And there was a case where there was a demonstration at Area 1 late last year or so, where a woman was actually crying that her friend or her auntie was kidnapped. They gang raped her, they videoed it, and they sent it to the children.
Wow.
It's as bad as that.
Did you see the training video of a purported school raid by bandits in Yauri?
And they were stripping them
and
naked.
They stripped all the students naked. They were stripping
them naked. That is inhumanity in the gravest term of it. And as a human being, I don't know whether these people are so high in alcohol, or the drive for ransom has blinded their heart against humanity. It's sad.
So let's look at what impact this is having. First, on education. What impact is insecurity having on education?
On education now, the girl child, a lot of them are being married off, especially underage. The age brackets in which they ought to be in school. Because the parents will be like, if I send my child to school, my child is not likely to return back. the way I send the child. Because whether that child was kidnapped and not returned, whether that child was kidnapped and returned, the psychological and psychosocial effect on that child cannot be overemphasized. So, like in the core north, where we are even trying to fight early child marriage, for instance, that advocacy on early child marriage does not seem to be working well anymore, because the parents feel that when they send their children to their daughters to school, their daughters will be abducted. And how many of them have the finance to move their children down south or east to give them good education? So it's reducing girl child enrollment in school as we speak now.
So you are saying invariably, like last year we have Kankara abduction, Kagara abduction, we have had Dapchi abduction, we've had Chibok abduction, and several others. Just yesterday, the governor of Governor Abubakar Bello of Niger State met with the president, and he said in January, between January 1 and 17th, which is 2 days ago, there have been over 50 attacks by bandits in Niger State. Over 300 Nigerites have been murdered, and about 200 abducted. And you are rest assured that some of them are women and children and girl child. So how do you think this is even impacting on the commerce, trade and commerce? Women are known to be traders. Do you think this gives people confidence to trade?
You know, Jide, household income have been affected because women multitask. Besides what they do within the home, the small, micro, and medium enterprise, most of them are run by women.
Exactly.
And because of this insecurity, household income have dwindled. So much so that feeding within the family has become a problem. For instance, a woman who goes out to the farm, because a lot of women are farmers.
Yes, smallholder farmers.
Yes, these farms may not be big, but they satisfy household feeding and put some money in their pockets.
Sure.
But now, majority of them can't go to the farm because of fear of adoption, because of fear of being raped, because of fear of keeping them there. There was one that trended when Kankara was adoption took place, where the adopters were even flogging them and telling them to be crying and screaming, so that when they call for ransom, the families will know that yes,
serious.
Yeah, this thing is taking place. And then how they mop up money from the community, calling their relatives everywhere to bring money for ransom. So it is actually wiping away household income that women bring home, that stabilizes the family. So it is important that the military and the government of today sets themselves well as to how to cope this thing. Because imagine in Niger State shares a boundary with Abuja.
Exactly. Yes,
and they will take over community, hoist their flag. And they will be asking the community to pay tax to them. Is that another republic?
In fact, the governor of Governor Zulum last week, was it last week? Yes, said that 2 local governments in Borno State is now under the control of Boko Haram and ISWAP. Does that bother you?
It does bother me, because for every community, you know, in the north, they are polygamy. A man, more than one wife. So you pair up one man with like 3 to 4 wives, for instance. So you can imagine the population of women. Where an adoption takes place, for instance, majority of them are likely to be women. And majority of them that are women are likely to be the ones that cannot escape because of the fragile nature of a woman. And then for such community, for instance, where they have taken over, they have hoisted their flag, they are asking the communities to pay them taxes. You can just imagine what is happening to women in those communities. You can imagine what is happening to women in those communities. So, and what makes it more worrisome is they will tell us that Boko Haram, some members have surrendered, and some people are saying that they should grant them amnesty. How can you grant amnesty to someone who just take up harm against the state and is not coming clearly to demand to say, this is what I want, give it to me, then we will end it? And then look at the effects of household income.
But someone like Sheikh Gumi in Kaduna State have been saying, you need to give these people amnesty. They got into banditry or terrorism as a result of the injustices meted to them by the society. Do you share this issue of granting bandits amnesty?
I don't share it. And Sheikh Gumi failed to tell us the reason why they took up that arm, because they may have confided in him. Because you cannot be saying grant them amnesty, without first telling us what they told you that is the core reason why they are taking up this harm. Because the violence against women and the girl child in this process, I know the boy child is also affected. A male is masculine, a woman is feminine. So I am not of that view. Because the more you do that, like those that were granted amnesty in Sokoto, Masari brought them in, gave them funds.
You mean
Katsina. They brought them in, gave them funds to start business or whatever, and a lot of them went back.
Even after the amnesty?
Yes, after the amnesty, a lot of them went back. So at the end of the day, of what use was granting that amnesty to them? A lot have been granted that amnesty, but they keep going back.
Okay. The Operation Safe Corridor of the Nigerian military, you alluded to it earlier on that over 8,000, according to the military sources, over 8,000, about 8,300 Boko Haram and ISWAP insurgents have surrendered under the Operation Safe Corridor, and they are being taken through the radicalization process with the aim of reintegrating them to the community. Do you think it's a step in the right direction?
I absolutely think that it's not a step in the right direction.
Also,
persons need to be tried and convicted. And then the victims, those that have died, what are you going to do to them in their graves? Those that have psychosocial effects on them, what are you going to do to them? Those that have been raped, maimed, what are you going to do to them? Is there any victim support fund that you have put in place, both at the federal and the state level, that those that have survived, for instance, will be able to assess and rebuild their life back? Because the more you are doing this, the more of them are coming up. So there needs to be clear strategy. Clear strategy in the sense that there need to be town hall meetings, there needs to be forum with women, civil society group, to say, okay, now we have gotten to this stage. Give us your ideas and your opinion. Let us see how we can move on from there. I think the military haven't been able to call the women CSO group, for instance, or even the general CSO group, to say, help us donate idea. Let us see what we can do about this messy scenario that is going unabated. Because it's actually going unabated.
Okay, let's come back to the girl child. You alluded to issue of early marriage earlier on. Issue of the female genital mutilation. What's your take on that? It's been widely condemned that female genital mutilation is not good for the girl child. And last week I had somebody here on my show that talked about menstrual hygiene, management of menstrual hygiene. And if you look at the water sanitation and hygiene project of federal government, girl child seems not to have been impacted positively despite this sloganeering and all of that. So what's your take on, first on female genital mutilation, an issue of menstrual hygiene for girl child?
A female genital mutilation, I for one have been part of that advocacy since 1997. And a legislation have been passed on it, which is checking it at the grassroots. And a lot of women, a CSO group, are actually also working on it on the grassroots in collaboration with the Federation of Women Lawyers, the Nigerian Association of Women Journalists, to see how it can be totally nipped in the bud. But I can assure you that it has actually reduced because it's a cultural based thinking, especially in the very rural communities. But the advocacy is still on. And then on the other aspects of the second part of your question,
the issue of menstrual hygiene,
the issue of menstrual hygiene, the WASH program. I am a Rotarian, for instance. It's part of our 9 points Rotary Ways, the WASH program. And when we get to a lot of communities, we even, especially schools, we send them menstrual pads and how to sanitize themselves. But you see, the critical thing is that when you get to rural communities, for instance, and even in FCT, the toilets positions are not favorable to women, whether you are on your menstrual cycle or not. So there is the need for government, for instance, to think that a woman is a special breed, and it's very easy for women to pick up vulnerable to diseases than men. That if you are building toilets in schools, for instance, you need to consider the type of toilets that will favor women. More so that these toilets, initially when they build them, they are water powered. Eventually, after some time, the schools are unable to manage those water supplies because we end up building boreholes in schools and in community marketplaces, because you go to community markets, there are no toilets. So we end up building boreholes for them. We build community toilets that they can access. So the advocacy is still on. I praise a lot of women group. A lot of women in the grassroots, they are doing so much with little or no funding at all. So government needs to, when you are doing project, for instance, always consider what the woman can benefit from that will be more accessible to the women and the vulnerable group, like the disabled persons, for instance. Don't forget that the disabled persons, for instance, there are women too that have disability.
There are women with disability
children with disability. The government planning does not incorporate them. So when that is done from the federal, state, dovetail it down to local government level, for instance, then the CSO will have less of work to do.
Okay, Princess, let's look as we wind down on this conversation. The issue of sex for food in IDP camp. That is part of impact of insecurity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
There were reports that in some camps, women are turned to sex slaves in order to get more ration, to be able to feed more effectively. Some of them have had to go in search of firewood in the forest to cook even the food ration that they are given in IDP camp. And in such situation, expose them to danger, to rape and all of that. You possibly have read about that, the issue of...
I have read about it.
In IDP camps.
Yes, I've read about it in our numerous forums. A lot of NGOs, community-based organizations that work in the rural area have raised it a lot of time. You see, it's so sad that the Boko Haram ravaging has continued, burning of houses, rendering families homeless, and they end up in IDP, foods that are provided either by the government, by donor agencies, just for women to have access to those food, to cook and eat and feed their children. They will now treat them for sex. It's really sad. And like we are setting up there's an organization that is setting up the 100 women lobby group, for instance. That lobby group should not just look at political aspect of women holding office. It has to look at issues like this. Why should a woman who ended up in IDP, for instance, the food that is meant for you, for your own survival, before you get it, you trade sex for it? So what I'm saying invariably is that where insecurity strive, for instance, is women and the girl child that bear the brunt the most. So it is very important for government to try as much as possible to end this insecurity, because the IDP camps are swelling every day. Look at the Benue IDP camp, for instance. They are swelling every day and they keep crying out. They want to go to their farm. They want to go to their little petty trading that sustain the household income. And they want their children to go to school, especially the girl child. And you will look at inside the IDPs, there are no schools there.
What about health? The impact of insecurity on health facilities? On
health is, in fact, look, let me tell you, how do they defecate inside the IDP?
Even freshening up?
Freshening up. How do they have their bath? How do they go to toilet? What are the health facilities? And then don't forget too that there are other like international agencies like the Red Cross, whose staffs have been adopted in one way or the other. And even killed. Who have refused to go back to those communities. Those are organizations that are helping to provide these health facilities for them in the IDP camps.
Okay. Because our time is fast spent and we have like 1 minute. What about, let's look in closing at the other side. Even the wives of soldiers, of members of the armed forces, many of them have been turned to widows. And what is happening to those widows and children of this? I mean, we just celebrated
the
Armed Forces Remembrance Day over the weekend on the 15th of January. But who is talking about the widows and children of those slain heroes or fallen heroes and the impact the death of their loved ones, their breadwinners is having on their families that they left behind? What have you to say about that?
You see, there needs to be a form of compensation. You know, I said this here, that there needs to be a fund kept aside for this category of persons to access. The Armed Forces Remembrance Day is just done once in a year. So what happens between the end of one and the one for the next year? So you find out that these household people, they will not be able to cope with life as it is supposed to be. So there should be a sustainable fund. Because you look at the budget that has been sent to the National Assembly, and even though the National Assembly member doctored the budget with over how many projects and billions of naira, there is no sustainable fund proposal or whatever in that budget to say, like what they did with APCON, for instance, AMCON. There should be a fund set aside. When it happens, you profile people, you document them, and then you segregate the fund, and then they can have access to it. You can tie it down to empowerment, any form of empowerment at all, so that it will not just be like sharing money again.
Okay.
And like a palliative, and the money just disappear.
All right.
You understand?
Thank you very much. That would be the size of our intervention on this. I mean, we can go on and on. Insecurity is impacting Nigerian women and girl child negatively. Whether you talk of agric, farming, trading, commerce, education, health, name it, it's impacting negatively on the Nigerian women and girl child, much more than we ever envisaged. So you have talked about trust fund. Thank you very much, Princess Halima Jubril, for coming on the show. We do appreciate your time with us and wish you well in the new year. That will be the size of our intervention on development focus with Judy Ojo on ITV today. Like I do tell you, this program is open up for sponsorship and advert placement. If you love what we are doing, come and partner with us. Do enjoy the rest of your day and best of the week.